I mean, I find it so interesting to watch, and he's doing so little, but it says so much. Hello and welcome back to my channel. So this week I want to talk about The Irishman. The Irishman has just been released on Netflix, and it is the new Scorsese film starring Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci and Al Pacino. Scorsese and Al Pacino haven't worked together before, and it's been something like 22 years, something like that, since the other three have worked together. What this video is going to be is a breakdown of some of the choices that the three actors made. I watched this film 2 days ago, and I honestly think the performances are amazing. I think there's so much to be learnt from them in terms of making really nuanced, interesting choices, which when you're watching it for the first time, you're not even really aware of, because they become so ingrained in who the character is, so much part of the fabric. It feels so natural when you watch them, but there's so much detail in there. The detail is what makes these people feel real. And the three characters are so different from each other in terms of who they are, the way they move, the way they speak. Saying that there is a commonality between the three of them because they live in the same sphere. There is a sense of the world that they're in based on the way they behave around each other, the way that their posture is a little bit. But within that, the three of them all run on with extremely different tempos. And I'm just going to dive in a little bit so we can go through them. Let's start off with Joe Pesci. So if you've seen him in other films, he is normally really high energy, really in-your-face guy, kind of funny, quickly spoken, dynamic, quite loud. And in this film, he is the complete opposite. It's a really amazing performance, and he's very still. He's a very, very still character. He's someone who is the observer, someone who kind of seems to know everything that's going on and soaks everything in all the time, and doesn't have to do much to command respect. Just sustained in his movements and contained as well. He doesn't use his energy where he doesn't need to. He doesn't gesticulate a lot. He is very calm always. He comes across as calm. His inner tempo seems very steady and consistent, and always it's quite a slow pace. And yeah, he doesn't really use his arms a lot to express himself. And there's actually a lot of power that comes to him from this, and it also gives a sense that you feel like he is aware of everything. He doesn't need to do much he doesn't need to show how he feels, and instead he's taking in everything around him. Really interesting to watch. I think there's a moment when he's sitting and his hands are on the table, and his hands are just still on the table. And there's always a tendency for people to fidget, and people fidget in real life. And it's really interesting that this character doesn't. There's a real control that you feel like, this discipline that this character has. Another thing I noticed about him, which is quite interesting, is that in moments when his character is in a non-critical situation, and it's in a casual situation, but he is talking to someone else or telling them what to do, he ends the conversation and he'll move away. So he'll be giving someone eye contact, and as he's saying bye, he'll already be walking off and looking elsewhere. And it gives the sense that he's in control. It makes him not too abrasive as well, because this character commands a lot of respect. But rather than holding sustained eye contact until the conversation's over, which can come across as quite threatening, he'll kind of pat someone and be like, okay, and move on. So that there seems like this trust or this friendly element, or that he's got your back. Now, that's not to say that he doesn't hold eye contact a lot. In other scenes, he really does. especially as he is someone who takes in a lot, he watches other people a lot. But I just thought that was really interesting to know. I think it's mainly in like the first interactions in the film, which takes the edge off anything that he's saying. And it also gives a sense that he is someone who is in control of lots of different things because he's already moving on to the next thing. So his character is someone who really listens. One of my favorite scenes in the film, I don't want to go too much into details of scenes because I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but there are three of them sat at the table, and De Niro is being confronted by something, and Joe Pesci's character is watching De Niro, watching how he reacts to this, and he doesn't move, and you can just see him taking in the whole conversation. There's such, I mean, I find it so interesting to watch, and he's doing so little, but it says so much. It says so much about what's going on inside and who this man is and how the power structure works within this dynamic. And again, this stillness and this quality of eye contact that he has really gives you the sense that he is lingering on, he sees every detail and he's listening to every word, he remembers things. So yeah, he's definitely a character who absorbs other people's energy and is able to take it in and be unchanged himself. So we on to the next one, which is De Niro's character. So one of the things I really noticed about De Niro in this, again, another amazing performance, is his use of breath and speech patterns. So out of the three, Pesci's the one with the kind of most contained, quietest physical performance. He's, like I said, quite sustained. There's no jerky, large movements. And Al Pacino's on the other side. He's much more mobile in his movements, and in the middle is Robert De Niro's character, who he has an element of being contained to a certain degree. So his physicality is quite interesting. His shoulders are always quite up, and with that, you don't ever see his arms like outstretched completely. They'll always kind of be slightly at his sides, but there is a movement in his hands and in his shoulders and in his head, and there's kind of a weight to this area, which actually I think a lot of actors in this sphere have this weight, which is kind of up here. You know, the kind of nodding, and the hands come up here and they're very expressive. So yeah, there's a lot there's an interesting weight or tension around this part of the body. Has a kind of like freeness in his head that kind of, it's almost like the weight can kind of bounce there. You know, like, you know, when a ball's kind of finishing bouncing, it's kind of that. It's not over the top, it's not a lot, it's just very subtle. So he definitely moves a lot more than Joe Pesci's character, but there's still this kind of area around him to like, it's almost like a limit to where he moves. He doesn't make any like lunging movements or anything like that. It's kind of contained within this sphere. His posture is quite straight. Actually, he also, when he's talking and standing, he usually stays in the same spot. He's not someone who moves around the space, so his expression really happens in this sphere. So yeah, coming to breath, he uses his breath a lot to almost get out his thoughts. He isn't someone who thinks and then speaks. As he's thinking of his response, there'll be that kind of thing. And there's a lot of, his words will sometimes, his sentences will be broken up as he's trying to find, this character's trying to find the right words to say in a situation. I think his use of breath's amazing, actually. It really, his intention comes across so clearly sometimes just in the sound he makes, or the like release of breath that he has. So it's not always just in the words, and the way he breathes obviously changes the way that his words come out. an amazing scene in the film. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail, where it's later on in the film and he's having a phone conversation with someone, and the way in which his breath and the words are intermingled allow you to understand his emotional state at the moment. In that moment, he's struggling to find the words, and you can see that, and the sound and the intention comes out through breath and this kind of mumbling, and you feel like you can sense his brain working in the moment as he's trying to get the words out. Makes sense as well because his character isn't at the top of the power chain, at the top of the hierarchy. He's a bit of a mediator to at times, and he doesn't want to upset people as well, so he looks for the right words. He's not a confrontational character. Listen out for his breath when you're watching it, and how his speech delivery, it makes it feel so natural, and you can really tell what he's feeling through this, because he's not a character who really raises his voice or has like a huge vocal range in that sense, because there is still this kind of contained feeling about him, but you see that release in those moments instead, with the stumbling breath and stuttering of words. I'd say holds eye contact a little bit more, not in an intense way, but in an open way, because he's not as high up. He's the one who's kind of doing what other people ask of him. There's an openness, a readiness to kind of hear what people say and to please. So there's an eye contact that comes with that. He's not trying to push anything or his own thoughts out onto anyone else. He's always reading people and trying to do what's right by them and do what's best in the situation. When someone's talking to him and telling him something, he'll be there looking at them, engaging. Okay, so Al Pacino. So his character is definitely the most explosive in the film. He's the most expressive with his voice and with his physicality. I think he changes the most throughout the film. I think he has the most range of expression, maybe that's the right way to put it, because his character doesn't hide how he feels. He doesn't have that restraint over how he feels. It all kind of comes out in the moment. So there are moments where he is quieter and more of an observer, but for example, the first time he meets De Niro in person, but unlike Joe Pesci's character, who seems to be taking everyone's energy in, Al Pacino's character seems to be pushing his energy out. This is what makes him very charismatic. It definitely draws people to him. People really like him, and it's because of this, this energy is charismatic. So what he does is he uses his whole body. So if Joe Pesci doesn't move much and De Niro kind of moves to this range, Al Pacino uses everything. You see his arms outstretched, you see him hardly ever standing still, in fact. Even when he's in a room and someone else is speaking, he'll be moving. He's always moving, really. When he tells a story, he'll be more gesticulatory. It's like he has to draw the story out of him when he's talking about something. And generally, you just get the sense that his energy is more all over the place, which gives the sense that his character is the most unpredictable. I think when you know people like this in real life, people kind of love them or hate them, because they're out and they're loud and they're larger than life, but that can also mean that they say and do things that other people don't agree with. One thing that I noticed, I only noticed it on a few occasions, but I thought was quite interesting, was sometimes when someone else would be talking to, this is in situations where his character was riled up, if someone would be talking to him, sometimes his body language would be forward, eyes open, and his mouth slightly open, as if he was primed to speak before they finish. So you get the sense that, sometimes when you have a conversation with someone and they speak and there's a pause and then the other person speaks, that's not going to happen with Al Pacino's character. You speak before there's a pause, he's speaking back already. So there's this real energy of like this forward pace and this energy just coming at you. And what it means is that it's sometimes slightly harder to penetrate that person and make them listen the other way around. So he maintains eye contact, but he also looks away, especially if he goes on a tangent about a story. He'll be looking slightly away from someone and then back to them to kind of almost be like, you understand, right? But you can see him disappearing into himself sometimes when he's telling a story, because he gets so it's like you can feel his emotions coming up and he gets so invested in his truth, his side of the story. Eye contact is really interesting, I think, in this genre of film. So much can be said with it, and sometimes there's a power in directly looking at someone's eyes and something has to be done. And then there's also a power in saying something has to be done and looking away. There is an indirectness in this type of world. It's a weird thing. There is directness and indirectness. People don't say things as they really are, but people know what you mean, and it's very clear to them, but they'll say it in a way that, like, if you were from afar watching the conversation, how serious some of these conversations are, you might not know, because they will just talk in quite a mild way, apart from Al Pacino's character. And with that, sometimes you'll see like a lean in and off center, like not looking directly at someone. The use of eye contact is really interesting. It's really difficult to pinpoint what it is because it changes all the time, but yeah, it plays a big part. The choice of whether to look at someone or to say something and look slightly away from them. Those moments are kind of when you really feel tension between the characters. And another note about the general world is so this is mainly a male-dominated world, right? There's a couple of women you see in it. They don't have major parts. They kind of just fill up the world around the main three characters. But the men are very tactile with each other. That's kind of something about how the etiquette of this world runs. So interesting note, if you're ever playing something that's kind of in a similar genre, think about how you embrace each other, a pat on the back. Even if things are tense, there is this kind of etiquette, and it's so important. This might be a kiss. This is kind of like gentleness and very powerful, like authoritative thing that's happening with body contact. It's very, very present in this particular world. So another interesting note to pick up on. Anyway, it kind of feels a little bit rambly, but I think it's really interesting to break down what these actors are doing. Let me know what you think of the film. I loved it. I thought all of them were amazing in it. As you can see, I think their performances are all so different and so interesting, and there's so much to kind of dive into and try to figure out how they got that feeling across, how you understood that character. And they all kind of live in these characters so much that you don't feel like it's a choice that's just stuck on them. It feels very comfortable in their bodies. Oh, actually, another thing I do want to say is I watched the chat Al Pacino, Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro had with Martin Scorsese. It's a 23-minute thing on Netflix that the four of them are just discussing the making of the film. And another thing that came up, acting note-wise, was that so the film takes place over quite a long period of time, and they're playing younger versions of themselves. So there is use of CGI, which I think is really good, to be honest. I think it is subtle, gets a sense of younger, and it means that you can distinguish, like, okay, that's a different time period to this period and all of that kind of stuff. But something they really had to think about when they were playing younger versions of themselves was their posture and how they stood and the speed at which they would stand up, and having that youthful spring in their step, essentially. You know, you think so much about the intention and who this person is, but when you're playing a different age and a few different ages, you have to remember how your body works for you at that particular stage in your life. It was interesting to hear about how they had to think about those things and have sometimes outside eyes saying, actually, you need to be a bit more sprightly in this scene in order to make your age believable in that particular part of the film. So quite a lot of physical work, subtle, but a lot of thought going into how these characters move at different stages of their life. Anyway, I think you should watch the film. Pop in the comment section what you think of it, and anything you notice, anything that you can see, any of the choices that you really like from any of the actors. And yeah, if you like the video, subscribe to see more videos like this, and I'll see you next week. Bye.